Welcome, caring viewers, to Planet Earth, our loving home. To raise awareness of the profound and devastating environmental effects of livestock raising, the UK-based non-profit group Compassion in World Farming hosted a lecture and panel discussion on the topic in London, England. The event, held in September 2008, brought together over 400 participants from government, the diplomatic sector, think tanks and research organizations. Panel participants featured Dr. Henning Steinfeld, Chief Livestock Specialist of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and co-author of the well-known 2006 United Nations report, Livestock's Long Shadow, Environmental Issues and Options. The panel also included Dr. Robert Watson, Chief Scientist of Britain's Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Felicity Lawrence, British author of best-selling books on the food industry, Professor John Poles, Senior Lecturer in Public Health Medicine at Cambridge University, England, and Compassion in World Farming's farm animal welfare expert Joyce De Silva. The lecture, entitled Global Warming, the Impact of Meat Production and Consumption on Climate Change, was given by the esteemed Dr. Rajendra Pachauri, Chair of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and a vegetarian. Media reports on the role of meat consumption in driving climate change have increased significantly since Dr. Pachauri's call in 2008 for the world to eat less meat to counter global warming. In addition to requesting people reduce or eliminate meat consumption, Dr. Pachauri is asking that the people of the developed world reach out to assist those 1.6 billion people on the planet that have no access to electricity. The Indian non-profit, the Energy and Resources Institute, or TERI, for which he serves as Director General, is helping these disadvantaged persons build better lives by making solar lanterns and flashlights available through TERI's Light a Billion Lives campaign. We now continue with more highlights from Dr. Pachauri's compelling talk.
Over two-thirds of the energy goes towards producing and transporting the animal's feed. Now, this is a significant figure, and this clearly points to the concept of factory farming of meat products. These are, of course, additional sources of greenhouse gases from meat consumption. Meat typically requires cooking at high temperatures for long periods. You can eat vegetables without cooking, and sometimes it's probably healthier to do that because you retain all the nutrition that's there in vegetable products. And a large proportion of meat also becomes waste products, bones, fat, past the date spoiled products and so on, which are likely to end up on landfills and incinerated. So that's an additional source of emissions that we need to take into account. If we look at two types of equivalent meals, let us say you compare a 6-ounce beef steak with the meal that's shown at the top, 1 cup of broccoli, 1 cup eggplant, 4 ounces of cauliflower, 8 ounces of rice. Now, if you look at what each of these two diets implies, one is associated with 0.4 pounds of CO2 equivalent emissions, and the 6-ounce beef steak amounts to 10 pounds of CO2 equivalent, which is almost 25 times as much. The livestock sector is by far the single largest anthropogenic user of land. Livestock production accounts for 70% of all agricultural land and 30% of the world's surface land area. And 70% of previous forested land in the Amazon is occupied by cattle pastures, and crops for animal feed cover a large part of the remainder. I was following Brazilian economy almost 15 to 20 years ago, and you would recall that there was a period in the 1980s when Brazil had a huge foreign debt, something like $120 billion at that point of time. And one of the means by which they decided to liquidate that and neutralize it was by converting large area of forest land into pasture land. And that's when the whole problem started, but it has continued. And Brazil is not alone. There are several other countries in the world that have done the same. 20% of pasture land is degraded because of overgrazing, compaction, and erosion. So, much of it then becomes unfit for any kind of cultivation. Other environmental impacts of livestock: amount of water needed to produce 1 kilogram of maize is 900 liters, rice 3,000 liters, chicken 3,900, pork 4,900, and beef a whopping 15,500 liters. So it's also intensive in the use of water if you take the entire cycle. Livestock is responsible for 64% of ammonia emissions, which contribute to acid rain. Livestock is among the largest sectoral source of land and water pollution, with nitrates and phosphorus, from slurry and silage which runs off, and from the use of nitrogen fertilizers. So if one takes the sum total of all these impacts, then clearly we have not really accounted for all the environmental impacts of meat and its production and consumption. Impacts of livestock on food availability: well, 1/3 of the world's cereal harvest and over 90% of soya is used for animal feed, despite inherent inefficiencies. It takes close to 10 kilograms of animal feed to produce 1 kilogram of beef, and 4 to 5.5 kilograms of grain to produce 1 kilogram of pork, and 2.1 to 3 kilograms of grain to produce 1 kilogram of poultry meat. Now, all of this is really happening on a much larger scale than was the case, say, even 2 or 3 decades ago. And even in my country, in India, the poultry industry is really booming. And much of it is based on imported grains that are used for feeding the poultry stock. And I've been going to China for several years. My first visit there was 1981, when I think most of China used to consume pork and, of course, seafood. But today, China has had a major increase in consumption of meat. So typically what's happening is, all around the world where incomes increase, people are shifting from vegetable to animal protein and meat consumption. Now, a farmer can feed up to 30 persons throughout the year on 1 hectare with vegetables, fruits, cereals, and vegetable fats. If the same area is used for the production of eggs, milk, or meat, the number of persons fed varies from 5 to 10. So there is a significant difference there.